And then did she think that she was going to like dial the number and they'd be like, future doctors waiting on Cole's evidence here. Leave a message for us to listen to in 20 years after the beep. Have a nice day. Fuck no.
Remember when we first met John McClane? Argyle picked him up from the plane and took him down the Nakatomi Tower at the Christmas party. And the terrorists were overzealous, but it was sweet when they killed Ellis. And with a little help from Alan, John McClane kicked ass.
Welcome back to Shat the Movies, the podcast where we answer the question, were the movies we loved when we were growing up really that good? Have you ever caught yourself thinking, why don't they make movies like they used to? Can you still remember spending your Friday night searching for the perfect movie rental at Blockbuster Video? Do you know what Blockbuster Video is? If you answered yes, then this is the podcast for you. I am one of your hosts, Gene Lyons, and alongside me are my co-hosts, Ash, the astrophysicist Goins.
Hi, y'all.
And Big D, Dick Ebert.
Good evening.
And each week we take a look back in time and decide if our favorite films still hold up. The movies we cover are chosen by you, the listeners, who generously commission the films you love. If you'd like to see all the movies we have covered, will cover, or want to choose one for yourself, please visit shatthemovies.com and have a look. At the end of each podcast, we'll provide you, the audience, with the number of wipes each movie take to get off your respective butts. So thank you so much for listening. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and share with a friend. That's how we help the podcast grow. Additionally, subscribe to our sister podcast, Shat on TV, where we review TV series such as Westworld, Taboo, American Gods, Lovecraft Country, Game of Thrones, True Detective, and Watchmen. Find all that information and past episodes at shatontv.com. And finally, to hang out with us live, follow and subscribe to our Twitch channel, shatthemovies.com/Twitch, where we play video games, host watch parties, and edit this podcast live for you. All that being said, Big D, what movie are you reviewing today?
So, Gene, tonight, the month of Steve continues. And instead of going back in time, we're going to go forward to 2035, then go back to 1990, go back to 2035, back to 1996, stay there for a while, and then, I don't know, maybe come back to 2020. As we review the 1995 science fiction film directed by Terry Gilliam, 12 Monkeys.
Well, and Hot Sauce Steve actually wrote in for this one, y'all, and he said, it's short and sweet, hello, Shat Crew. So I picked this movie for one reason and one reason only. We are in a pandemic. When I was picking out movies, I was surprised that no one had already picked it, as we had been in a pandemic for almost a year already at that time. Like all my commissions besides it, I watched it over the last year or so. Never got around to rewatching it. Sorry. 12 Monkeys was a weird movie, but I thought it held up well. Just like Alien, the future tech was questionable. The screen sizes are way too small in both movies. Sincerely, Hot Sauce Steve.
It's funny Steve should mention that because the King Bee and I were cleaning out my garage and I found 3 old phones. I found a Palm, I found a Razor, and I found a Nokia. And they were all so fucking tiny. Like, how did we get duped into carrying... Like my iPhone 12, which is the normal size iPhone 12, it's fucking massive in comparison.
Yeah, they're like bricks now. Finn just got his first phone, and it's much cooler than any phone we had. But the screen on it, we got him like a really tiny screen, and I was having trouble like seeing and like figuring out how to maneuver things. And I was like, I need a bigger screen, but it didn't, you know.
Well, Steve talks about pandemic films and outbreak films. Forget this. How has nobody commissioned Outbreak? You get a fucking monkey. You get Dustin Hoffman. You get another Academy Award winner. We get, what the hell was his name? Show Me the Money. Wasn't he in it?
Cuba Gooding Jr.
I got a theory about this because Station 11, by all accounts, is a terrific show. Everyone's like, oh, this show is fucking amazing, but it's just not catching on. I don't think anybody wants to watch like pandemic shit during a pandemic.
Well, see, I think that's not true. I think we used to. Like when the pandemic first started, I was obsessed with watching like the mistakes that other people had made. Like I watched Contagion, and then I realized the mistakes we were making in real life were fucking worse than the mistakes in the movies. And I think that's the problem is now we don't want to watch people make better mistakes than we're making currently.
No, Contagion is too much now. Outbreak, I'll take it. Where the government comes in and they're going to like level an entire city. They're going to nuke towns to stop the pandemic. Or Dustin Hoffman running around chasing this goddamn monkey. That shit's funny. Contagion's, it's terrifying.
But you got to realize that if they were to wipe out all the towns that were doing shit wrong, it would be like Houston, Orlando, Phoenix.
All the places we live. Yeah.
Well, 12 Monkeys is a 1995 science fiction film directed by Terry Gilliam. Inspired by Chris Marker's 1962 film La Jetée, starring Bruce Willis, Madeleine Stowe, and Brad Pitt, with Christopher Plummer and David Morse in supporting roles. After Universal Studios acquired the rights to make La Jetée as a full-length film, David and Janet Peoples were hired to write the script. Under Gilliam's direction, Universal granted the filmmakers a $29.5 million budget, and filming lasted from February to May 1995. The film was mostly shot in Philadelphia and Baltimore, where the story was set. 12 Monkeys was released to critical praise and grossed $168.8 million worldwide. Brad Pitt was nominated for the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor, and he won the Golden Globe Award for his performance. The film also won and was nominated for various categories at the Saturn Awards. Big D, Ash, we always ask where you were and what your memories are of the movie we're covering. This week it's 12 Monkeys, and Ash, we'll start with you.
This is one of those movies that was around the time when I started realizing that there were like smart, edgy films that people that were cooler than me enjoyed. And I realized immediately, like within the first few minutes, that this was one of those smart, edgy films. So naturally, I completely pretended that I loved it and got it, even though I really only understood like 40% of the actual film. And more than that, my parents hated this movie. They thought it was ridiculous and that it made no sense. And so for me, that made it even cooler. So I've always had really positive memories of this, but this is one of those films that I think I maybe saw like in theaters and like once after. Like it isn't one that I've seen a lot recently. So I was really curious to go back and watch to see if like that hype kind of held up over time.
100%. Movies from 1994 and 1995 like really started the era when I broke free from my family's taste in movies and I started seeing stuff that like an alternative teen would like. And 12 Monkeys, like it definitely wasn't a movie for my mom. It wasn't a movie for fans of 80s movies. It was edgy and dark and irreverent and like hip. And I loved it. I thought it was so cool for getting it. But like you, I only got like, maybe half of the movie and didn't really understand everything that was going on.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear both of you say that because I felt like an idiot. Everyone knows I love an apocalyptic tale. I love destruction. I like to see landmarks eviscerated. I like to see the world in ruin. That's the type of film I love. So I was lucky enough to see an early preview of this right after Christmas in 95 in New York City. The manager who I was kind of hanging out with at Blockbuster Video, she had managed to score tickets. So we went in, saw an early preview. I was excited. I was like, this, Bruce Willis, we got a pandemic. We got to see the Philly in ruin. I walked out, I was disappointed. I can't lie, because this was more Terry Gilliam than I expected. I had loved Fisher King, but I thought maybe here it's going to be grounded. It's a pandemic. It's tragic. There's billions of people dying. And instead we get like fucking accordion music and we get like ridiculous lines. So I was too embarrassed though to complain because she was more cultured than I was and she loved this film. So I just bit my tongue and kind of nodded and went, oh yeah, brilliant, brilliant.
So we got the baseline set here. None of us got it back in the 90s. Let's see if we get it now. Big D, roll that trailer.
You're a very good observer, Cole.
We have a very advanced program, something very different.
An opportunity to reduce your sentence considerably.
And possibly play an important role in returning the human race to the surface of the Earth.
No license, no prints, no warrants.
But he took on 5 cops like he was dusted to the eyeballs.
What year is this?
What year do you think it is?
1996.
That's the future, James. Do you think you're living in the future?
I'm simply trying to gather information to help the people in the present trace the path of the virus.
We're not in the present now.
This is a place for crazy people.
I'm not saying you're not mentally ill. For all I know, you're crazy as a loon.
The army of the 12 monkeys, they're the ones that spread the virus.
Monkeys.
He's been living in a meticulously constructed fantasy world, and that world is starting to disintegrate.
You haven't become addicted to that dying world?
No, sir.
He needs help.
I think I'm crazy when people start dying next month. I don't belong here.
You're here because of the system.
I know some things that you don't know.
Yes, my son.
You sent me to the wrong year.
You're certain of that?
Science ain't an exact science.
You had a bullet from World War I in your leg, James. How did it get there?
I don't know.
You're a trained psychiatrist. You know the difference between what's real and what's not.
You said that I had delusions. You said you could explain.
I'm trying to.
I want the future to be unknown.
I can help you. Get you out.
We're all monkeys.
The thing mutates. We live underground. They're watching you.
I just want to do my part to get us back.
Released in 1996, wipes out almost all of humanity, forcing survivors to live underground. In 2035, prisoner James Cole is selected to be sent back in time to find the original virus to help scientists develop a cure. Meanwhile, Cole is troubled by dreams involving a foot chase and a shooting in an airport.
So as I mentioned before, I'm a fan of some of Gillian's work, but his stories, they have to be specific to work. In The Fisher King, you've got mental illness, you've got somebody dealing with tragedy, which affects their perception of the world. In Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, you got a drug-induced haze. That style works with this, but here it feels forced. The art design, it seems like they pulled it directly from City of Lost Children. And I love City of Lost Children, surprisingly. It was one of our first foreign films. But you got these like plastic coats that he's wearing with like LED Christmas lights, and he's out in the world. He's exploring 2035 Philly. And then you get the doctors, the scientists, they're wearing like this steampunk contraptions on their head. Their scientific doctor gear doesn't make sense. They're sitting high up on this ledge, and they have these strange like monocles and reflective glasses. They're also wearing clear plastic doctor coat. They've got like a video screen orb that has magnifying glasses on. Doesn't make sense. An elevated chair. The time travel contraption, which looks like some kind of pulsating like children's tent. I don't know what that is. You know, and then for some reason they get Cole later on laying in a bed with a giant painting over his head as the doctors sing, "I found my thrill." I'm like, what is this?
I mean, you say that, but I think about if somebody from like 1880 were to look at me right now. I got multiple monitors in front of me, this giant ring light. I got this microphone in my face with like this silly, windscreen pop protector. And then there's a little box to my left that shoots out cold air. But, it kind of looks like an accordion a little bit. I mean, it seems silly, but we haven't seen the future.
Well, and I think one of the things that works about it is like, this is a movie where it's not just like the future. This is a future that shouldn't have ever happened because it's a future that had to develop underground. And so I think what was really cool about what they did with this is the steampunk aesthetic and like the really like crazy like biotech. I think it looks like something like otherworldly in a way, which I thought was really interesting. I thought the opening with them like in the hammocks and like their jail cells, I thought all of that worked really well.
You said future tech. Did they find some endless roll of clear plastic?
Obviously.
Big D, I agree that I was very perplexed at this early stage in the movie, but for different reasons. I can't believe I'm saying this, but I would actually like someone to hold my hand at this point in the movie. There's so much dead air, I feel, as we're seeing all this stuff, the plastic suits, the blinking lights, the doctors, or just James Cole like navigating through this world. And I feel like that time could have been used to let us learn more about the world. Like I'm curious. I want to know now. Tell me more about James Cole. Feed me some more clues. And I think Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas really worked for me because I got to see Gilliam's like wild directorial vision, but it was coupled with an entertaining and informative narrator. So I felt grounded psychologically, even though I was very perplexed visually. Without it, I found myself getting really impatient with this movie. Like, fucking, would something happen already?
Well, we all know how much I love Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. Not a fan of that movie. And the narration of that movie, like, it made me want to tear my skin off. What I liked about this movie is actually kind of the opposite. I liked the dead air. I liked feeling as confused as he did. And more than anything, I think a lesser movie would have told us a lot more about the actual virus than they do here. And like, I found myself wanting to know, but I kind of like that we didn't, because in my head, I'm like, okay, does it make you bleed like Ebola? Is it like a flu? Is it something COVID-like? And for me, the ambiguity kind of kept me interested, and it kept the plot fairly fresh for me throughout.
No, how about you show us something of the world? He's an inmate. We don't see anything but his cell. Where's the rest of the 1%? What are people who aren't forced volunteers living in a cage? What do they look like? What's the economy down under the world? Is this like Demolition Man? Are there Taco Bells in the future? Are they down there? Is it like Chud? Is there some kind of like Mad Max vibe? I want to see that.
Well, I mean, that aside, one thing that I did think that held up over time with this is the theme from this movie. I've always really liked it. I think it's really haunting. I think it's creepy. I think it sets the tone for what's to come. And I did some research about it, and it's based on the Argentine tango, and you can really feel that. You can feel that drama building, which I really think makes sense for this film. But then they pair it with that really shitty early 90s logo, because like all of a sudden, like the graffiti of the 12 monkeys like pops up on screen, and that wasn't bad enough. The monkeys themselves start rotating around the main monkey, and that's where they kind of fucking lost me.
Oh, contraire. I think you're very wrong. That is very Banksy. That's very futuristic. That is like a $5 million wall today. That's artistic. And you said this is great. This helps build the tension. I completely disagree. This is circus music. I was questioning whether I had a head injury because I felt like a monkey attached to an organ grinder with a top hat and a cup running around. Anytime there was tension and you were like, oh shit, it's going to get dark, you'd have that bam, 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 bam. I was like, oh, fuck, it's Gilliam. Yes, it's like some kind of, I can hear the tango influence, but it is jarring and not in a good way.
What's weird is I didn't notice any of this. I was like so entranced by the visuals. I didn't notice there was music at all. And this might just be a thing with me because the King B and I were talking about Gangs of New York the other day, and he's like, do you remember how Gangs of New York was totally ruined by U2 doing the music for it? And I said, I don't remember any music from Gangs of New York. Go back, by the way, and watch like the fight scenes from Gangs of New York. Music makes a big difference, and it fucking ruined that movie.
Now I can't go back and rewatch it because I love that movie. But one thing we haven't talked about yet is Bruce Willis. And this clearly, I think now Bruce Willis is a much different actor than maybe he was in the 80s, but this was a big turn for him. This is a big turning point in his career. And Terry Gilliam was not convinced at all about Willis. He was not convinced that he could act well enough to be in this movie, but Bruce Willis actively believed that this was a chance to remake his image. And so I think he really was successful by doing it in this film. And he actually turned out to be a fairly decent actor. He wasn't just John McClane, right? And what I found out in my research is that Terry Gilliam was so nervous about Willis that he provided him a long list of Bruce Willis cliches that he wasn't allowed to do on set. And if he did any of them, they immediately stopped filming. And maybe that's why it does work, because Willis, I think this may be his best role ever. I think that Bruce Willis is highly believable. And the fact that this was the first movie that he died in up until this point, I think makes it kind of like extra special.
Forget about dying. I think this is the most Bruce Willis ass that we have ever seen. We get 3 full ass shots within like the first 8 minutes. We get a Brad Pitt ass shot. Now, I'm not complaining about any of this, but it was a lot of ass. So Bruce, you know, he can't do his cliche moves, but he had no problem throwing that bare, stinky ass up on screen.
Yeah, he was doing like Mel Gibson cliche moves at this point. But he was phenomenal in this movie. I mean, there's a scene where James Cole is like first being interviewed by Dr. Reilly, and they've got him in this room. He's like in like a, you know, plastic tarp. He's squatting. He's drooling. He looks exactly like you would imagine a man who just time traveled and then was beaten and sedated would look. And it was making himself vulnerable like that, like rolling the dice like that on a roll and being like, yeah, you can see me like this. It definitely is signaling the world, like I'm ready for some different types of roles and I'm not afraid to do this. But as you mentioned, Brad Pitt, I like Brad Pitt. I think he's a terrific actor, but I was surprised to hear that he won a Golden Globe for 12 Monkeys. Like if anybody won anything, it should have been Bruce Willis. His portrayal of a mental patient is so fucking over the top. And while it was somewhat entertaining, like it doesn't come close to the work he did in Fight Club, which won him 0 Golden Globes. Goins almost felt like a shitty Tyler Durden.
Yeah, I think overall his performance is pretty insulting. I mean, not only is he overacting, here's the deal. People with bipolar disorder, even when they're hospitalized, don't act like this. Like, this is not what mania looks like when you're bipolar. I happen to be married to someone who is deeply bipolar, and he's never acted like that. And I think that what you're seeing here is this is what an actor thinks that people with mania do so they portray mania to look this way? And it winds up just being gross. I think honestly, and I love Brad Pitt, but I think that he's the worst part of this movie. And also, what the fuck is that eye contact they have on him? It was like they had to like make him ugly. It was like, Brad Pitt's too pretty, let's ugly him up. So they gave him a shitty haircut, and then they gave him a shitty contact that made his pupils different sizes, but he's still sexy as fuck. And like, it looked stupid. It looked like Brad Pitt with a contact trying to act in community theater.
Well, Cole arrives in Baltimore, but 1990, not 1996 as planned. He is incarcerated at a mental hospital on the diagnosis of Dr. Kathryn Railly. There he encounters Jeffrey Goins, a mental patient with anti-corporatist views. Cole tries to warn a panel of doctors that the virus outbreak has already happened. After an escape attempt, he is locked in a cell, but he disappears, waking up back in 2035. The scientists play a distorted voicemail message that asserts the association of the Army of the 12 Monkeys with the virus. Cole sees photos of numerous people suspected of being involved, including Goins. The scientists send Cole back in time, but he accidentally arrives at a battlefield during World War I, is shot in the leg, and then is transported to 1996. So I've never understood why James Cole is in such a rush. Like when he first arrives in 1990, they say he gets in a fight with some cops, and he's so spastic and so urgently telling everybody, he's got to tell them that, he's on a mission and he's got to accomplish all this stuff. But if you find out you're in 1990, you're 6 years ahead of the virus outbreak. Why don't you take your time, quietly gather facts, build a case, enjoy living above ground for a few years? And for that matter, I don't understand why they're sending prisoners. Why not send actual scientists to do the work? It seems like the film is unnecessarily making the mission and Cole's challenges far more extreme than they need to be.
I don't know. I mean, we find out at the beginning that he's been told that nobody comes back from these missions. And so they don't have like any reference at all. So I kind of get the fear because he don't like tell him anything about time travel. They don't give him like a handbook. So I think maybe he doesn't know if he's going back in like 5 minutes or in 5 fucking years. And for me, I would be pretty fucking scared too. I would want to get shit done. And more than anything, I want to have proof of my pardon, because I think that's a part of this that kind of gets lost because of the chaos of the movie, which is that he's in prison. So obviously whatever the Taco Bell laden otherworldly land that Big D wants that the 1% have, he doesn't have it and he wants to get to it. So I kind of be Russian too.
Why the fuck do you want a pardon? You got a pardon. They let you out of prison. Do you want to get out of a world and end the pandemic and be back up on topside? You're already there. Now, granted, 1990 Philly doesn't look that different from 2035 Philly. But normally I would take 6 months investigating in 90s Philly over 6 months in dystopian Philly.
Yeah, when Cole gets plucked out from his cell and everybody's like, they never come back. They never come back. Because they stay in 1996.
Yes, they fucking run away. Great. They run away. They have kids. They find hookers. They find drugs. And they just live there. That's why.
Is that the order? Kids, then hookers, then drugs?
Well, everybody in the movie jokes. Did you find women? Were you with women? So I'm not the only one thinking that's the order.
Well, we get to, him time traveling again, and they mess up again, and he winds up in World War I. And I actually like the way I think this is like consummate Terry Gilliam in the way that he directs this scene, because there's all this confusion. You got the French language, you got Bruce Willis's very nice, although slightly pale ass nakedness. And it's really disorienting the way that he's shot. And I think it's one of like the higher points of the movie, because, then his friend is there confused and he's shot and then he's gone. And I think that this is the part of Terry Gilliam films that I like to see, which is like chaos is that kind of controlled. And Bruce Willis, again, he's just fucking stellar in this scene.
Before I get actually, thank you, Ash. That was 4 ass Bruce Willis shots. That's the 4th time we saw his bare ass. So before I get actually,
plus the picture, spoiler alert.
Well, we don't see his ass there. It's from like the chest up.
Hello, it could have been that parody if she pulled out another piece, because she kind of just keeps like folding it out. Maybe like that's the rest of it.
For me, this entire World War I scene, it felt like a bad episode of Quantum Leap. Like, of all the fucking places Bruce Willis could end up, he ends up in the trenches during a rush into no man's land during World War I on the Western Front. this is like people who believe in past lives, but they're always like royalty or somebody famous. They weren't just Joe who worked as a mechanic in, Poughkeepsie.
Well, I'm going to address both of your problems a little bit later. I just want to build my case as the plot goes that these convenient mistakes, that where they appear, when they appear, do seem random and out of place, like a 1980s television show, but maybe they have a bigger meaning.
I think you've been spending too long in Florida. The conspiracy shit's getting in your brain. Ash, you mentioned the World War I scene being a high point in this movie. I think that Terry Gilliam is actually at his best when he leads the viewer to question reality. And he's done this in pretty much every movie of his that I've seen. At this point in 12 Monkeys, I was pretty convinced that James Cole was crazy. Because as you mentioned, Big D, the future prison, it looks a lot like 1990s mental institutions. His panel of doctors looks similar to, the doctors that he has in 1990. And the 1990 doctors are much more believable. The way he disappears without scientific explanation, all of it leaves you questioning what's real. So you start to understand why James Cole would question what's real as well. And then you're left wondering, okay, what do you do if you don't know what's real? Which interferes with the most important question in life, what do I want?
Yeah, I really liked how he made the audience feel insane too. Like he almost didn't need Goines' character because like you're kind of the stand-in as the audience member for the mental institution. Because what Gilliam does is he makes the future like really cold, and it's unbelievable in how cold it is. And it feels like there's going to be this twist that, the whole time James Cole has been wrong and the whole time like there was no virus. And I like that. I like feeling constantly unsure of where it is, where we're going. And there's this thing that Gilliam does really well, which is he makes sure that nothing feels linear, right? Like everything is all over the place and it feels really fucked up and chunked together. And therefore you question the narrator. And that's a really smart part of this film.
Well, in 1996, Reilly gives a lecture and meets Dr. Peters, who tells her that apocalypse alarmists represent the sane vision, while humanity's gradual destruction of the environment is the real lunacy. Cole arrives, kidnaps Reilly, and forces her to take him to Philadelphia. There, they learn that Goines is the founder of the Army of the 12 Monkeys. When Cole confronts Goines, he denies any involvement with the group and says Cole originated the idea of wiping out humanity with a virus stolen from Goines' father.
So this is clearly a time travel movie. So we've got to talk about the time travel science. And as a Doctor Who fan, I'm a big fan of really well done time travel. And while I don't think this is like the best that we've seen, I think some of the time travel science is handled fairly well. Clearly Cole has affected the future. He's affected the past. And the realization that he has that he may have influenced the actual virus he's trying to prevent, I think that's a really great mindfuck moment. And the weight of that whole butterfly effect that he could be the reason why this all took place to begin with, I think it works pretty good.
But I think calling it the science of time travel is a stretch. I felt Time Rider, The Adventures of Lyle Swan had more science in this movie. There's no explanation of how Cole time travels, how he gets back, why does he need a suit to go one way but not the other. And I understand that the movie keeps that mysterious, and it's basically doing what I said to do with Titanic, is we don't need to see every part of it because that might look shitty, or it might just be unbelievable, or you might scoff at it. But I needed something to go with. Just even the theory of how he time travels would be enough.
But listen, okay, in this world, let's just break down the science. They can track a volunteer through space and time with a chip implanted in their teeth, but somehow they accidentally send both Jose and Cole back to the exact trench during World War I on the French front, where there happens to be a photographer just conveniently sitting by. So now keep in mind, right before they sent him back, Cole, that time, he says, we're going to send him back to the right time. It's going to be on the money. But yet somehow they send the two of them back. These mistakes seem to correspond perfectly to inflection points in history that ensure that this apocalypse takes place. They send Cole to 1990 first, where he happens to meet Dr. Kathryn Railly. That meeting and him disappearing then led her to write the book about the Cassandra complex. She then becomes a big author. She goes on a lecture tour where she's lecturing a group of scientists conveniently, which leads then to the post-lecture book signing where she meets and inspires Dr. Peters, that crazy bastard. That sets his whole plan in motion to end humanity. Okay? Not to mention that Cole gave Jeffrey the idea to create the 12 monkeys while he was in jail. All of these ideas seem to be setting the whole pandemic in motion.
But what's the motivation? You're saying that some point in the 2020s, scientists discover time travel and their grand plan is to send prisoners back in time to create a virus that drives everyone underground, but then they continue sending prisoners to jeopardize that reality? How does that make sense?
So, Gene, what are the two big motivators in the world for anything?
Sex.
Money and power. Right? Who's sending him back? A group of 7 scientists who happen to be the only ones in control and power in the future? I think it's better to be running the world underground than living above. They're doing it to keep control. They know what's happened and they're setting the wheels in motion.
They've got control of like 100 drippy shit pods. Who wants that?
Oh, instead, in 1996, they're in charge of fucking 5 drooling people within a mental institution. Later on, I'll get to it to prove in my crazy ass eyes, that this was planned, that they knew what happened, that they set it all up. Because the science can't be so perfect, yet they keep making mistakes that cause the future to happen.
Stay tuned, kids. Cole is transported to 2035, where he reaffirms to the scientists his commitment to his mission. When he finds Reilly again in 1996, he tells her he now believes himself crazy. Meanwhile, she has discovered evidence of his time travel. They decide to depart for the Florida Keys before the onset of the plague. On the way, Cole and Reilly learn that the Army of the 12 Monkeys was not the source of the pandemic. At the airport, Cole leaves a message telling the scientists they're on the wrong track and he will not return. Cole is confronted by Jose, his cellmate from his own time, who gives Cole a handgun and instructs him to follow orders. So I understand that we're operating in Terry Gilliam's magical realism. It's a term he uses himself to explain how his movies work. But sometimes that feels like a cheap way to hand wave serious plot holes. Like, why does Dr. Reilly, a psychiatrist, know how to treat massive gunshot wounds with roadside supplies? As you mentioned, Big D, who's this photographer who happened to be at a World War I battlefield at night, right when Jose and James cross paths in a trench? And by the way, photographers used flash powder up until the 1930s. So this guy or gal is running around with flash powder, and you can't get combat photos at night in World War I. Any World War I like battlefield photo you see that was shot at night, that was staged. Like they had to stand very, very still, pose, and snap the photo.
Y'all, when the whole photo has naked Bruce outstretched, I about lost my shit. I laughed out loud and like I actually said out loud, like, you remember how we talked a couple weeks ago about how it feels like we're all watching it in the room together because we can like predict each other's, responses. I feel like I said to you both like in the ether, well, that adds half a wipe, because I actually said it out loud in my living room because it was ridiculous. It was so stupid. And for a director that is so smart and a plot that has like so many smart pieces to it, like this is it. This is your turnkey, is a fucking photo from World War I that she happened to use in her book. And also, why did she crop it that way in her book? It makes no sense. Like, why wouldn't you include the whole fucking photograph? Because like, I'm looking at photographs, I'm like, well, that's weird. There's a naked bald dude stretching out his hand toward the guy.
I feel like I've known you all my life, but I'm going to crop you out of this photo for my book.
Right. No. Like, I'm going to straight up crop you out. Like, it makes no sense.
You guys are crazy. It makes perfect sense. If you're trying to reinforce and affirm that the Cassandra complex exists, you send people back periodically through time that will then appear in this book, which then motivates Dr. Peters. It's all part of the plan, people.
Dude, you are fucking grasping at straws here, 'cause this was dumb. No. And more than anything, Reilly, she is a horrible sidekick, okay? This lady is swayed way too easily in one way or the other. She's super quick. Like, she's been the whole time. She's a psychiatrist, this well-known psychiatrist. And then she sees the naked picture and she's like, oh, time travel's real. And then she calls the carpet cleaning place. And what the fuck did she expect? Did she think that she was going to like dial the number and they'd be like, future doctors waiting on Cole's evidence here. Leave a message for us to listen to in 20 years after the beep. Have a nice day. Fuck no. They're obviously going to cloak it, but she's like, it's a carpet cleaning place. Merry Christmas. Have a nice day. I mean, y'all, she's an idiot. She's not smart at all. And I like Madeleine Stowe, but she's so bad in this because of her character.
Maybe she's been stealing some of the patient's meds. Maybe her life's a bit boring back in Philly. You thought that shit was weird. When it gets into the hotel scene and they go to this place, they have no money, they're going to rent a room by the hour, and Bruce Willis says, she's not my honey baby, she's my psychiatrist, Buster. I was like, what just happened? The movie gets ridiculous. It goes from apocalyptic, this terrible vision of the future, 5 billion dead, it's terrible, to a bald pimp kicking in the door, beating up the psychiatrist. You infringing on my territory, bitch. Get in the closet. It's crazy. Then Bruce Willis goes into the bathroom. We think he's going to kill him, and he's only popping his teeth out. The cops come in, and the pimp has the best line. He says, I was attacked by a coked up whore and a crazy dentist. I'm starting to think everybody is mentally ill. This movie gets wild beyond belief, and then it turns into hijinks where they're running from the cops. They're hiding in a window by a department store. Oh, zoinks! We're on the television camera, and everybody can see us. The movie gets crazy.
Oddly enough, this is where I grabbed the popcorn and like hunkered down. Like we're getting little tastes of Fear and Loathing, and I was loving it. It made me wish the movie was more true romance and less Brazil, because I was getting true romance vibes here with like the tropical stuff, the fake mustache, like the sunglasses, and like knowing they're doomed, but there's this love flourishing. And I was like, okay, cool, I'm down with this. I actually enjoyed the last, I'd say, half hour of the movie the best.
Well, and I think it's ridiculous because like they go and they get all this shit and it's supposed to be like found stuff. They go to this cheap ass store and somehow that she's able to find like the most perfect lace front wig. And then they get him like the cheesiest fucking Halloween mustache. Like it made no sense at all. None. And it did feel a little true romance, but they didn't have the humor. Maybe there's a little more humor kicked into this, right? Which I get that Jeffrey is supposed to be, but all his shit just falls flat. Like it falls completely flat. And so it ends up humorless and insane.
Reilly spots Dr. Peters at the airport and discovers he is about to embark on a tour of several cities that match the locations of the viral outbreaks. Cole forces his way through a security checkpoint in pursuit of Peters, but is shot by police. Reilly begins to scan the crowd around her as Cole is dying. She makes eye contact with a small boy, the young James Cole, witnessing the scene of his own death, which will replay in his dreams for years to come. Peters, aboard the plane with the virus, sits down next to one of the scientists from the future who comments that her job is insurance. The young Cole watches the plane take off from the ground outside the airport. So we talked about how Dr. Reilly is just a shit sidekick. She's a bit of a nut job. And until she uttered that line to James Cole, I feel like I've always known you, I thought 12 Monkeys was ignoring the reality of women being abused. I thought what was going to happen here is we're going to have a romance. We're going to overlook how Cole tied her up, threatened her, locked her in a trunk, and just kept putting her in these horrible situations. And then she just kept showing him understanding and caving to whether it was his mission or his bravado or his charm or his brokenness or Bruce Willis's naked ass. So I was relieved when the explanation we got is that she's linked to him, right? Like eternally linked to him in some nonlinear form, like you said, Ash. But how? Like she doesn't see him as a boy until he's already dead as an adult. So where is this link coming from? Is it the bits that he left in history? And if that's the case, then why doesn't she spend the rest of her life trying to tell young James Cole what to do when they meet again?
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, first of all, I think their link is clearly the photo, right? Like, that's it. But I think that we need a little Sarah Connor moment here. Like, she needs to warn him. She needs to train him. She needs to let him know that the dude in the cheap blazer with the ponytail hairpiece is the one that's gonna, you know, set all this shit off. Or if you don't want to do that, at least like scream out, hey, Bruce, this is you. You're gonna die like this one day. And so that's the part that he knows. She could have let him know right there because he even said to her, this lady, she looked at me and she looked so sad. So be like, I'm the one who looks sad. Like, it would have been very easy.
No, then she looks even crazier. She's already been on the run. She's hiding out with him. She looks fucking great. She's making out with him. He's just pulled out 3 teeth. He's bleeding all over the place. She doesn't look very stable. That's not what she should have done. Why not do what Doc and Marty did? Write him a note and stick it in his pocket. Do something. Plant information that he will find. But it runs into Gene talked famously about the grandfather paradox. This ensures that the future happens. It's predetermined. You can't change anything because it already did happen. But Gene, you poo-pooed my idea about these evil doctors, scientists in the future wanting to maintain their control because the world they have there of power might be better than they have. But I just want to ask you this. Logically, as an intelligent man, somebody who can break down some concepts. Okay, I'm a scientist who can now travel through time. What would be easier for me? Okay, I want to stop the release of a virus in the past. Would it be easier to find a pure sample of the virus, then return to 2035 where I live underground in a plastic raincoat, try to come up with a cure for the virus, or would I want to go back to 96, maybe let the people, the researchers there, provide them the information to stop it from ever happening, or the police, say 5 billion people? You know, it makes no sense. And you get Jones there who says, I am the insurance policy. Everyone assumes that's the insurance policy to kill Dr. Peters. Why? Peters has already started the spread. He already gave it to the TSA agent. He's already put it on a plane. To me, her insurance policy was to make sure that Cole actually does not stop Peters. Why'd you have Jose go give him the gun to run through TSA, the checkpoint, to shoot at him? All you got to kill is Dr. Peters. Jose's got the gun. Unless you want to ensure that Cole does not interfere with his little trip around the world, they could have stopped it, but they chose the most complex way to guarantee the future happened exactly like it did.
I think you answered your question just a few minutes ago, that it's the grandfather paradox. Cole's stance is the same as the scientist's stance. It's a fatalistic viewpoint. He understands that there's no changing the virus getting out. It's going to. No matter what you do, it's going to. They do not believe that history can be rewritten or outcomes stopped. All they care about is getting a pure sample so they can impact the future. And the clues are there in the language. Cole always refers to 2035 as the present. He never talks about the future. He never refers to 2035 as the future. That is the present. The 90s is the past. And dude, talk about a butterfly effect. Cole has to die there. That's why they want him to have the gun. What if he survived? If he survived, it could fucking throw all sorts of things into wreck. So they're trying to maintain as many things as possible as they occurred while switching just one thing, which is getting a pure sample of the virus. And that's why she's there on the plane to get it.
How's it going to ruin the plan? The world ends in 2 weeks. What damage is he going to do in 2 weeks? He could have gone down to Florida, had a nice 2 weeks, gotten laid, and then whatever, he survives. No, what they did was ensure this happens. I can understand what you're saying, but no, Jones was, it just doesn't make sense. You could have stopped it. Why would you want to rebuild the world when you could have stopped it from being destroyed?
Because you can't stop it from being destroyed.
Yep.
That's what they're establishing, that no matter what you do, now will always be now. You can't change the past. You can only change your future.
Deep.
Now is the time in the podcast where we give our wipe scores for 12 Monkeys. The Shat score is our way of telling you how many wipes this movie takes to get off your respective butts. 0 wipes is a perfect movie. It is the soapy butts of the criminally insane. And 5 wipes is an absolute disaster. It is living in the many abandoned theaters of 90s New York, a.k.a. Big D's teen years. Ash, we'll start with you. What is your wipe score for 12 Monkeys?
I still really enjoyed this movie. I thought it was fine, but it's clearly an average movie for me. I think a lot of it feels forced. There's a lot that's obvious. Brad Pitt is awful, but it is fun in a lot of parts of it. And there are parts that are thought-provoking. I think Willis is great. Visually, it's absolutely beautiful and amazing at times. But having gone through a pandemic the last 2 years, I'm glad to say our pandemic did not look like this one. I think that it's 2.5 wipes.
All right, that's 2.5 wipes from Ash. I agree, Ash. This is entertaining. It's great to look at. It's thought-provoking. And at times it feels like fun, but 12 Monkeys isn't the masterpiece I thought it was. If you would have asked me how great this movie is before I watched it, I'd say this is a 1-wiper for sure. This is a 2-wiper. It doesn't compare to anti-capitalist wacko movies like Fight Club or time travel Bruce Willis movies like Looper. Those are in the 1-wipe territory or better. This is squarely 2 wipes.
So I enjoy a lot of Terry Gilliam's whimsical films, but it's an other world. It's you're not trying to ground it in reality. There's certain topics that you would not want to see a Terry Gilliam movie. A 9/11 Terry Gilliam movie? No, I'm not in for it. A Holocaust film? No, nothing about cancer. His films have to be very specific. When you're trying to get an apocalyptic tale of the future and dread in a dystopian world, it didn't work for me. It was a long 2 hours and 20 minutes. I felt much like I did on that late December evening. I did not enjoy it, and I wish it could have been better. It's a 3.5 wipe movie for me.
All right, with Big D's 3.5 wipes, my 2 wipes, and Ash's 2.5 wipes, that gives us an average wipe score of 2.6 repeating wipes for 12 Monkeys.
So, Gene, with a score of 2.66 repeating wipes, that now ties this in the 159 spot with Pretty Woman, Top Gun, Rambo First Blood Part 2, Ghostbusters, Poltergeist, Roadhouse, My Cousin Billy, Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, LA Stories, and Crocodile Dundee.
Did you just say My Cousin Billy?
What did I say?
My cousin Billy.
My Cousin Billy, yes. It is slightly better than Kingpin and Robo-Jocks and slightly worse than Father of the Bride and Adventures in Babysitting.
Oh, it is not worse than Father of the Bride.
It is to people with a heart.
Oh, God. It is to people with a penis.
Actually, I do want to see Terry Gilliam do a
romantic comedy.
Yeah, I just know it's the parents meet the son-in-law kind of movie. Everything's just she's coming down the stairs, but the camera's at like a diagonal angle anyway, just swinging around wildly. Steve Martin and Terry Gilliam. That's the matchup you really want to see.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Almost as good as Peter Dinklage and Cyrano.
Yes.
And before we wrap up, a big thanks to everybody who's been calling in, leaving voicemail, everybody who's using our speak pipe, and those who are writing us at host@shatthemovies.com. Ash, I believe we have an email this week from Adam M.
Hey, Shat Crew. I've been catching up on your most recent cast and wanted to help out Big D with his questions during the In the Army Now episode about how things go with co-ed units and my experience. I signed up with the Army National Guard in December of 98 and went to my basic and AIT in late 99. I was a 13 Fox forward observer and had an all-male class. My first experience with women in uniform was an Army Reserve drill sergeant who was instructing us for about 2 weeks with our 2 active duty instructors. She actually taught me a lot and helped me build a lot of confidence in myself. We did have a dumbass in my platoon who winked at her and had us doing M16 PT while he walked up and down the bay singing some stupid love ballad to her and the rest of the cadre. Fast forward to my NG unit, it's all males. Female soldiers on our one actual base in PA are few and far between. We only see them the 2 weeks of the summer we come for our big training event. Rest of the year, no female soldiers. Then comes Iraq. It's 2004 and we're in Mosul, cross-trained as 31 Bravos. I'm still with the all-male unit, but several of the other active duty MPs we worked with had females. They're pretty badass from what I recall from when they were around, but I do know that several of them went home early due to becoming pregnant. I even have a buddy who's still married to a nurse he met on our base. So after returning in 2005, I got out, but ended up re-enlisting in 2010. I went 11 Bravo then, 11 Charlie to get promoted. I currently work with a lot of females around my unit, though they all have different MOSs. No combat arms gals here, just medics, mechanics, cooks, and staff. And just like the guys I'm in charge of, they are all different. Some are hardworking and dedicated to the military. Some are paying for college and just want to get their contracts done. A few are partiers who make training interesting, fun, and very stressful. The random hookups while in training, the relationships between soldiers that become long-term, the married couples who jointly serve, get the idea. Some of them are great soldiers and can work with each other and their peers without issue. More than a few have relationship issues that have to be managed. Also, Big D, the whole relationships between ranks is basically this. I have a SSG can't sleep with a PV2 or anyone subordinate to me. Same with a CPT and an SPC. SPC and below can bed whoever, but it's frowned upon if higher up sleep with lower enlisted, basically. We have incidents where shit like that happened. Typically, the higher up gets in deep shit and the lower enlisted is given the option to transfer to avoid being ostracized. Hope this rambling email answers some of your questions, Big D. Thanks for your service. And to all you fine folks at Shat the Movies, thanks for hours of endless quality audio listening. Your hard work and dedication to a great podcast is not unnoticed, by me at least. Ash has been a wonderful addition to the cast and I look forward to each new episode. You've had me reminiscing on many a great movie from my youth, including my 2 personal favorites, Aliens and Transformers the movie. I look forward to Alien coming in February if I have the funds. Are we talking $100, $500, $1,000? I would love for you to review the assembly cut of Alien 3. Trust me, it makes the movie quite a bit better. Thanks for taking the time to read this. All the best, Adam M. P.S. Hey, Big D, did you have a motto in your old platoon? In Iraq, ours was embrace the hate. In my mortar platoon, our current motto is mortars are hung. And yes, since you would probably never ask, my junior soldiers draw dicks on all sorts of equipment.
So I was in 326 Engineers at the 101st. So we were sappers. So the motto of the sappers is lead the way. But I'm going to go translate what Ash had said there. So he was talking about relationship between ranks. A staff sergeant can't sleep with a private, and a captain can't sleep with a specialist. Now, my thing was I was sleeping, but this just happens to, it's brought back a memory here. I was sleeping with a 31 Bravo who was in Mosul in 2004. She was deployed there. So I would be very curious, Adam, to hear if one of their names was Jenna. I would be very curious to hear that. But I was sleeping with her. I was a sergeant and she was a specialist, but we weren't in the same unit. So it was interesting to hear how they deal with it. And yep, pregnancy, I could imagine, would be a reason to send you back. And I've looked up some photos of her, and I don't think she's got a kid, but be interested to hear if that happened.
Big D, did Jenna have a weird like breathing pattern? Did she sound like she was congested all the time? Like kind of a mouth breather?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Why?
Just wondering.
Why? You got to tell me that.
But anyway, Adam, it's funny you should write in about it. It's interesting that like in the military works the same as like in the civilian world, in the sense that like I've always had a thing in my company where I don't have an issue if two people have a relationship as long as one is not subordinate to the other. Fucking just this week, what's his ass? Jeff Zucker from CNN. He resigned as president of CNN because he's sleeping with another executive. And I was like, well, they're both executives. Who gives a shit? That shouldn't be a problem. I don't know. I think we're a little too puritanical about people at work fucking each other. It's going to happen.
Yeah, but Gina, you and I are all for the co-ed sex in the showers, the bears hooking up in Starship Troopers. So I don't think we're the normal viewpoint of people out there.
Well, Adam, thanks for writing in. I hope you liked the Alien episode, and Alien 3 is way better than people give it credit for. So I'm glad you have an appreciation for it as well. I have not seen the assembly cut, so I'm very curious. And with that, Big D, what do we have coming up next week?
Gene, next week will be one of my favorite films growing up. It's one of the original top 10 films I'd listed when starting the podcast of films I want to do. I'm very excited. In modern-day Egypt, Professor Daniel Jackson teams up with retired Army Colonel Jack O'Neill to unlock the code of an interstellar gateway to an ancient Egyptian-like world. They arrive on a planet ruled by the despotic Ra, who holds the key to the Earth traveler's safe return. Now, in order to escape from their intergalactic purgatory, Jackson O'Neill must convince the planet's people that Ra must be overthrown. Commissioned by Steve W., released in October of 94. And woo, this was a good one for me.
Well, thanks, Hot Sauce Steve, for this month of Steve, and we've got one more to go, so look forward to that next week. That concludes this week's episode of Shat the Movies. Be sure to follow us on social media and share with a friend. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, and Instagram at Shat the Movies. You can email us, host@shatthemovies.com. Support the podcast by shopping our Amazon affiliate link, buying our merch, or commissioning your own movie. You can find all that information by visiting our website, shatthemovies.com. While you're there, you can use the SpeakPipe feature to leave us a voicemail straight through SpeakPipe as a service. Also, you can check out our sister podcast, Shat on TV, where we review TV series such as Lovecraft Country, Westworld, True Detective, Taboo, American Gods, Game of Thrones, and Watchmen. Find all that information on our website, shatontv.com, wherever fine podcasts can be found, including iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, and YouTube. Be sure to subscribe, and if you stop by iTunes, please leave a review. That helps the podcast grow. On behalf of my co-hosts, Ash and Big D, I'm Gene Lyons. Be sure to join us next week for the following movie.
It has been buried for thousands of years. A mystery. A secret. A threshold to the future.
Where'd you find this? I've never seen anything like this.
One man will break the code and open the door.
Well, this should read Stargate. It was in front of us the whole time.
The other will lead the way.
Why are you here?
I'm here in case you succeed.
Jackson's identified the seventh symbol.
Backup storage, reserve power, on.
What is it?
It's your Stargate.
We've opened a doorway to a world we know nothing about.
Beam has locked itself onto a point somewhere in the Kalium galaxy.
It's on the other side of the known universe.
Your turn now.
They prepared for danger.
Begin final evacuation.
They expected the unknown.
Stabilizing system.
Initiated commencement sequence.
But they could never have imagined this. What a rush.
Stay right here and shoot anything that comes down that ramp. Your job here is to realign the Stargate. Can you do that or not?
I can't.
What the hell is going on? My orders were simple. Track down signs of any possible danger. Well, I found some.
I can't make it work without the 7 symbol.
We have to abandon base camp!
You got 7 minutes.
Now, the most amazing discovery of our time.
Jackson, wait for me.
Is about to become the most extraordinary adventure of all time. Kurt Russell, James Spader, Jay Davidson. Stargate. A Roland Emmerich film.
Ruled by the despotic Ray.
Rah.
Ray.
Ruled
Hey.
All of a sudden he works at a truck stop.